The blade was 3 inches from her throat when pale fingers wrapped around the steel. Zara Morrison didn't even see him move. One moment she was backing against the brick wall of the alley, her attacker's knife gleaming under the streetlight, and the next there was someone else there, someone impossibly tall and impossibly fast, standing between her and death. Blood welled up around his grip, crimson droplets pattering onto the wet pavement, but the white-haired man holding the blade didn't so much as blink. "You chose the wrong prey tonight," he said, his voice carrying an accent she couldn't place, old and refined and absolutely terrifying. The mugger's eyes went wide. He yanked on his knife, trying to pull it free, but it didn't budge. The stranger's hand was like a vice, his skin so pale it seemed to glow in the darkness. Then Zara saw his eyes deep red like rubies lit from within, and her breath caught. "I suggest you run," the stranger continued, his tone almost bored. "Before I decide your blood might be worth something after all." The mugger let go of his knife and bolted, his footsteps echoing down the alley until they faded into the night sounds of New York City. Zara stood frozen, her back pressed against the cold brick, watching as the stranger examined the blade still embedded in his palm. He pulled it free with a wet sound that made her stomach turn, then let it clatter to the ground. "You're bleeding," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned those crimson eyes on her, and she felt pinned in place like a butterfly under glass. Up close he was devastatingly beautiful in a way that didn't seem quite human. His hair fell past his shoulders, white as fresh snow, and his features were sharp and aristocratic. He wore an expensive black coat over what looked like a tailored suit, all of it perfectly pressed despite the violence that had just occurred. "It will heal," he said simply. As if to prove his point, she watched the gash in his palm begin to close, the torn flesh knitting itself back together before her eyes. Within seconds there was nothing but blood-stained skin. "What are you?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Something flickered across his perfect features, amusement maybe, or resignation. "You should go home, Miss Morrison. This part of the city isn't safe after dark. How do you know my name?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped back, creating space between them, and Zara realized she could move again. She pushed off the wall, her legs shaky, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "Thank you," she said, because her mother had raised her to be polite, even to mysterious strangers who caught knives barehanded. "You saved my life." "Go home," he repeated, but his voice was gentler now. "And Zara, be more careful." Then he was gone. Not walking away, not running, just gone, as if he'd never been there at all. Zara stood alone in the alley, her heart pounding, staring at the knife on the ground, and the small puddle of blood that was already being washed away by the light rain that had started to fall. She should have been terrified. She should have run screaming. Instead, as she made her way back to her apartment, checking over her shoulder every few steps, all she could think about was the way those red eyes had looked at her, intense and ancient and somehow sad. The next morning Zara told herself it had been a hallucination brought on by fear. She'd been attacked. Someone had helped her, and her traumatized brain had filled in the impossible details. People didn't have red eyes. Wounds didn't heal in seconds. And no one moved so fast they seemed to disappear into thin air. She went to work at the museum like always, cataloging new acquisitions in the basement archive where she spent most of her days. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was running a new exhibition on medieval European artifacts, and her job was to document everything before it went on display. It was quiet work, solitary work, and usually she loved it. Today, though, she couldn't concentrate. "Earth," to Zara. Her coworker Marcus waved a hand in front of her face. "You okay? You've been staring at that same inventory sheet for like 10 minutes. "Sorry, I'm just tired," she forced a smile. "Long night?" "Well, wake up. Henderson wants us to look at the new stuff that came in from the Prague estate. Apparently it's pretty incredible." Zara followed Marcus down to the secure storage area, where climate-controlled cases held the most valuable pieces. Henderson, the senior curator, was already there, practically vibrating with excitement. "Look at this," he breathed, gesturing to an ornate sword laid out on velvet. The blade was silver, etched with symbols Zara didn't recognize, and the hilt was wrapped in leather so old it had turned black. 15th century, maybe older. And this, he moved to the next case, where a pendant lay glittering. "This is supposedly from the Corvinus family. You know, the vampire nobility." Zara's hands went cold. "The what?" Henderson laughed. "Oh, it's all legend, of course. Rich families in Eastern Europe used to claim vampire ancestry to seem more powerful and mysterious. It was like a status symbol. The Corvinus line was one of the most famous. They ruled parts of Romania and Hungary for centuries, and there were all sorts of stories about them. Drinking blood, living forever, the whole 9 yards. But it was just stories," Marcus said, peering at the pendant. "Right?" "Of course. Though I have to say, whoever they were, they had excellent taste. Henderson carefully lifted the pendant, letting the chain drip through his fingers. The centerpiece was a deep red stone that seemed to glow in the fluorescent lights. This ruby alone is worth a fortune. The craftsmanship is exquisite. Zara couldn't look away from it. Something about the pendant made her skin prickle, like standing too close to a fire. Where did you say it came from? A private estate in Prague. The family fell on hard times and sold off everything. We were lucky to get these pieces. There were a lot of collectors interested. Henderson set the pendant back down with reverent care. Anyway, I need you two to do a full documentation. Photos, measurements, historical research, the works. This is going to be the centerpiece of our new exhibition. For the rest of the day, Zara tried to focus on her work, but her eyes kept drifting back to that pendant. The red stone reminded her of something, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what. It wasn't until she was riding the subway home, watching her own reflection in the dark window, that it hit her. Red eyes. Like rubies lit from within, she nearly missed her stop, jolting back to awareness just as the doors were closing. The walk from the station to her apartment building took her past the alley where she'd been attacked, and despite herself, she slowed down, peering into the shadows. There was nothing there now, just garbage bins and graffiti and the smell of rain-soaked asphalt. Looking for something? Zara spun around so fast she nearly fell. He was standing right behind her, impossibly close, dressed in the same black coat as before. In the better light of the street, she could see more details: the sharp line of his jaw, the way his white hair caught the glow from the street lamps, the ancient weight in his crimson gaze. "You," she managed. "You're real, unfortunately." There was dark amusement in his voice. "You should be at home. I am going home. This is my neighborhood." Zara crossed her arms, trying to look braver than she felt. "Do you live around here?" "No." "Then why are you here?" He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. This close, she could see that his skin really was as pale as she remembered, almost luminescent, and there was something off about the way he stood, too still, too perfect, like a statue given life. "I wanted to make sure you were safe," he finally said. "Safe from what? That guy from last night? He's long gone. There are worse things than muggers in this city, Zara." The way he said her name sent a shiver down her spine. "You never told me yours." "No, I didn't. That's not fair. You know mine." Another flicker of amusement crossed his features. "Life rarely is. Go home, little historian. Lock your doors." "How do you know I'm a historian?" But even as she asked, he was already walking away, his long coat billowing behind him. This time she could see him leave at least, though he moved with inhuman grace, disappearing around a corner faster than anyone should be able to walk. Zara stood there for a moment, torn between following him and doing the sensible thing. Sensible won out, but only barely. She climbed the 3 flights to her apartment, locked the door like he'd suggested, and then spent an hour at her laptop researching the Corvinus family. What she found made her blood run cold. The Corvinus line wasn't just some eccentric noble family. They were at the center of dozens of historical accounts about vampires. Chronicles from medieval monks, court records, even personal letters all referenced them. They'd supposedly ruled the night in Eastern Europe for over 1,000 years, a hidden monarchy that controlled vast territories from the shadows. There were descriptions of their appearance: pale skin, white hair, red eyes, and their powers. Impossible speed and strength. Rapid healing. And of course, an insatiable need for blood. The family had disappeared from historical records around the turn of the 20th century, when the old European monarchies fell apart. Most scholars assumed they died out or simply stopped pretending to be vampires. But some of the accounts Zara found, buried in obscure academic papers and conspiracy theory websites, suggested something different. They claimed the Corvinus family had gone underground, establishing new courts in major cities around the world, hidden among the human population. It was ridiculous. It had to be ridiculous. But Zara kept thinking about the way her rescuer's wound had healed, about his red eyes and impossible speed, about the way he'd called her by name without being told. She looked up the exhibition pieces again, finding the catalog entry for the pendant. It was listed as the Seal of Corvinus, supposedly worn by the head of the family, the Vampire King, according to legend. Whoever possessed it could command the loyalty of all vampires under Corvinus rule. Zara closed her laptop and stared at the wall of her tiny apartment. This was insane. Vampires didn't exist. They were folklore, fiction, Halloween costumes. The man who'd saved her was probably just some rich eccentric with weird contact lenses and a penchant for dramatic rescues, except his blood had been real, and his hand had healed before her eyes. She didn't sleep well that night. Every shadow seemed to hide something watching, and she kept imagining red eyes in the darkness. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed of medieval castles and throne rooms lit by candlelight, of white-haired figures in silk and velvet, of blood red as wine. The next day at work, she couldn't stop thinking about the pendant. It sat in its case in the secure storage, beautiful and terrible, and Zara found excuses to go down and look at it. The red stone seemed to pulse with its own light, and more than once she could have sworn she heard something, a whisper maybe, or the echo of distant music. "You're obsessed," Marcus said, making her jump. "It's just jewelry, Z." "Pretty sure, but still just stuff." "Right, just stuff." She turned away from the case, trying to shake off the strange fascination. "Sorry, I'm being weird." "You've been weird since yesterday. What's going on?" she almost told him. Almost explained about the attack, the mysterious rescuer, the impossible things she'd seen. But the words stuck in her throat. Marcus would think she was crazy or traumatized or both. "Nothing," she said instead. "Just tired." That evening she took a different route home, avoiding the alley. She told herself it was because she didn't want to be reminded of the attack, but really, she was afraid. Afraid of what it meant if she saw him again. Afraid of what it meant if she didn't. She was halfway up the stairs to her apartment when she felt it, that prickle on the back of her neck that meant someone was watching. Zara spun around, her keys clutched in her fist like a weapon, but the stairwell was empty. "You're getting paranoid," she muttered to herself. Continuing up to her floor, he was waiting outside her door. Zara's heart slammed into her throat. The white-haired stranger stood in the hallway, looking completely out of place among the scuffed walls and flickering fluorescent lights. His hands were clasped behind his back, and he watched her approach with those unsettling red eyes. "How did you get in here?" she demanded. "This is a secure building. Your security is inadequate." He said it matter-of-factly, without any hint of apology. "We need to talk." "About what?" "And you still haven't told me your name." "Driven Corvinus." He said it like it should mean something, and then Zara's knees went weak, because it did mean something. It meant everything she'd been reading about was real. "You're one of them," she whispered. "The vampires, the Corvinus family. Not one of them. I am the last of them." His jaw tightened. "And you, Zara Morrison, have something that belongs to me." I don't have anything of yours." "The museum where you work. 3 days ago they acquired several pieces from a estate sale in Prague. Among them was a pendant, the seal of Corvinus, my family's crest." He took a step closer, and Zara instinctively backed up against her door. "I want it back. It's not mine to give. It belongs to the museum. It belongs to me." There was steel in his voice now, an authority that made her spine straighten. "That pendant has been in my family for over a millennium. It was stolen when my court fell, and I have spent decades tracking it down. I will have it back." Zara's mind was racing. She should be screaming, running, calling the police. Instead, she found herself thinking about the historical records, about vampire courts and ancient power struggles. "Your court fell?" Something flickered in Driven's eyes, pain, maybe, or rage. 60 years ago. My people were betrayed, slaughtered by rivals who wanted to claim my territory. I survived, but barely. My court, my family, my entire line gone." He looked away, his jaw clenched. "The pendant is all I have left of them." Despite everything, despite the fact that he was a vampire, that he'd just broken into her building, that this entire conversation was insane, Zara felt a pang of sympathy. She knew what it was like to lose family. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 19, and her grandmother, who'd raised her after that, had passed away 2 years ago. She had no siblings, no cousins, no one. She understood being alone. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I really am. But I can't just steal from the museum. I'd lose my job, maybe go to jail." "Then tell me how to retrieve it myself." "You want me to help you rob the Met? I want you to help me take back what is mine." Driven's eyes burned into hers. "Please, Zara, I saved your life. I am asking for this in return." It was emotional blackmail, and they both knew it. But there was something raw in his voice, a desperation that cut through her fear. This wasn't just about a piece of jewelry for him, it was about his family, his history, his identity. "I need to think," she said. It's a lot. You have until tomorrow night." He reached into his coat and pulled out a card-heavy black stock with silver lettering that simply read an address in Lower Manhattan. "Come to this location at midnight. If you agree to help me, we'll discuss the details. If not," he trailed off, turning away. "If not, I will find another way, and you should forget we ever met." "Wait." Zara caught his sleeve without thinking, then immediately let go. His coat was ice cold under her fingers. "Why me? Why did you save me that night, and why are you asking me for help instead of just taking the pendant yourself?" Driven looked back at her, and for a moment his expression was unguarded. "I saved you because I could. Because standing by while an innocent dies is something I left behind when my court fell." He paused. "And I am asking you because the museum's security is designed to stop thieves like me." But you have access. You could remove it without triggering alarms, without leaving evidence. You want me to abuse my position. I want you to make a choice. Help me or don't. But know that this pendant is more than a historical curiosity. In the wrong hands, it could be used to control what remains of vampire society. There are others searching for it, Zara. Others who will not be as gentle as I am if they learn you have access to it. With that cheerful thought, he disappeared down the stairwell, moving so fast she only caught a blur of white and black. Zara stood outside her door for a long moment, her hand still tingling where she'd touched his coat, before finally letting herself inside. She spent that night staring at the card he'd given her, turning it over and over in her hands. The address was in a warehouse district, the kind of area that was all industrial buildings and empty streets after dark. Going there alone would be stupid, possibly suicidal. But if what Dreven said was true, if there were other vampires looking for the pendant, if it really was some kind of control device, then keeping it in the museum might be dangerous too. What if someone broke in? What if people got hurt? Zara pulled up every piece of information she could find about the Corvinus family, reading until her eyes burned. The Vampire King wasn't just a title, it was a position of absolute authority in their society. And the seal was supposedly what legitimized that authority. According to the legends, whoever wore it could command obedience from any vampire of Corvinus blood. If Dreven was telling the truth about being the last of his line, then the pendant was rightfully his. And if it fell into the wrong hands, if some rival vampire got hold of it, she didn't let herself finish that thought. The next day crawled by. Zara went through the motions at work, cataloging artifacts and taking photographs, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about Dreven's face when he'd talked about his fallen court, about the loneliness in his eyes that matched the loneliness she felt sometimes. Late at night in her too-quiet apartment, Henderson called a meeting in the afternoon to discuss the exhibition timeline. Apparently, some wealthy collector had been calling, offering an obscene amount of money for the Corvinus pendant. We turned him down, of course, Henderson said, looking pleased with himself. This piece is going to draw huge crowds. It's staying right here. What collector? Zara asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Name was Alexander something, foreign guy, very insistent. Henderson shrugged. Doesn't matter, the pendant isn't for sale at any price. Zara felt cold. Alexander could be a coincidence, except she didn't believe in coincidences anymore. Not after the past few days. If another vampire was trying to buy the pendant, that meant Dreven was right. Others were searching for it. She made her decision. At 11:30 that night, Zara stood outside the warehouse address Dreven had given her. The street was deserted, lit by a few struggling streetlights that cast more shadows than illumination. The building itself looked abandoned, its windows dark and its metal door rusted. She knocked, feeling ridiculous, and nearly jumped out of her skin when the door swung open silently. No one was there. After a moment's hesitation, she stepped inside. The interior was nothing like the exterior. Instead of an empty warehouse, she found herself in what looked like a luxury apartment, all dark wood floors and expensive furniture, with artwork on the walls that probably belonged in a museum. Candles provided the only light, casting flickering shadows that made everything seem to move. You came. Dreven emerged from a doorway at the far end of the room, still dressed in black, still impossibly beautiful. I wasn't certain you would, yeah? Well, I'm either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Zara hugged herself, suddenly aware of how alone she was with a vampire who'd admitted to drinking blood. Someone else is looking for the pendant, a collector named Alexander. Dreven's expression went cold. Alexander Drakel, I should have known. He was one of those who led the attack on my court, and now he's trying to buy the pendant from the museum. He won't stop at buying. If they refuse, he'll take it by force. Dreven moved closer, and Zara fought the urge to back away. How many people work at your museum at night? Security guards, maintenance staff? I don't know, maybe a dozen? They'll all die if Alexander decides to retrieve the pendant himself. He has no mercy, no restraint. He is everything the humans fear when they think of vampires. Dreven's jaw tightened. I am asking you again, Zara. Help me take the pendant before he does. Help me save those lives. And what happens after you have it? What will you do? He was quiet for a long moment. I will use it to rebuild, to call what scattered remains of my people still live and establish a new court. Vampires need structure, leadership, or we become monsters. Without a king, without laws, we are nothing but predators. He met her eyes. I will be what my father was, a ruler who protects both our kind and yours. Your father was the vampire king. For 800 years, he believed in coexistence, in maintaining the balance between our worlds. When he died in the attack, that spell died with him. I am trying to restore it. Zara wanted to believe him. Looking into those ancient red eyes, seeing the weight of centuries and loss in them, she found that she did believe him. He wasn't just some monster, he was a king in exile, trying to reclaim his throne and save his people. The security in the archives is serious, she said slowly. There are cameras, motion sensors, guards who do regular patrols. But I have access to the system. I could turn off the cameras in the storage area for a few minutes, maybe create a blind spot. That's all I need. A few minutes. Driven stepped closer, and this time Zara didn't move away. He reached out, his fingers cool as they brushed her cheek. Thank you. You don't know what this means to me. I'm doing it for the guard, she said, but it wasn't entirely true. She was doing it for him too, for the grief she saw in him, for the loneliness that called to her own. They planned it out over the next hour. Zara would go in early before the museum opened, when only minimal staff was present. She'd disable the cameras in the secure storage area, and Driven would slip in through a delivery entrance she'd leave unlocked. He'd take the pendant, and she'd reset everything before anyone noticed. In and out, clean and simple. What if something goes wrong? She asked. Then I'll make sure you're protected. No harm will come to you, Zara, I swear it. The way he said it made her shiver, not with fear, but with something else entirely. There was an intensity to Driven, a focus that made her feel like she was the only person in the world when he looked at her. Why? She asked suddenly. Why do you care about protecting me? I'm just some human who happened to be in the wrong place that night. Driven's expression shifted, something vulnerable crossing his perfect features. You remind me of someone I lost. Her name was Alara. She was human. Like you. She worked in my court as a scholar transcribing our histories. She died when the court fell, trying to save some of the children. He looked away. She was brave and kind, and she saw past what I was to who I was. When I look at you, I see that same courage. Zazra's throat felt tight. I'm not that brave. You're here, aren't you? Helping a monster you barely know, risking your career and possibly your life. He turned back to her, and the sadness in his eyes was almost overwhelming. That's braver than you know. They stood there for a moment, the silence heavy between them. Then Zara cleared her throat, breaking the spell. I should go. I need to be up early tomorrow. I'll walk you home. You don't have to. I do. His tone left no room for argument. There are dangers in this city that you can't see, Zara. Until this is over, until the pendant is secure, you're at risk simply by being involved. So she let him walk her home, this ancient vampire king moving through the shadows beside her. They didn't talk much, but the silence was comfortable, and more than once Zara caught herself stealing glances at his profile, wondering what it must be like to carry so many years, so much history. At her building, he paused. Tomorrow then, 5 in the morning before sunrise. I'll meet you at the delivery entrance. Why before sunrise? I thought vampires could walk in daylight. She'd read that in several of the more modern accounts that the old legends about vampires burning in sunlight were exaggerated. We can, but it weakens us significantly. The sun drains our strength, makes us vulnerable. I prefer to work at night when I'm at full power. He hesitated, then added, in case anything goes wrong. Nothing's going to go wrong, Zara said, trying to sound confident. I hope you're right. She didn't sleep at all that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined a dozen ways the plan could fail, alarms going off, guards catching them, Alexander showing up. But mostly she thought about Driven, about the way his touch had felt like ice and fire at once, about the raw emotion in his voice when he'd spoken of his fallen court. At 4:30 she gave up on sleep and got dressed. Dark clothes, comfortable shoes, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked like she was preparing for a heist, which she supposed she was. The subway was nearly empty this early. Just a few tired-looking night shift workers heading home. Zara kept her head down, her heart pounding, half expecting police to board at every stop and somehow know what she was planning. But nothing happened. She reached the museum without incident, let herself in through the staff entrance, and made her way down to the archives. The security guard on duty barely glanced at her. She often came in early to work, so it wasn't unusual. In the computer room, Zara pulled up the security system. Her hands were shaking as she entered the override codes, creating a loop in the footage for the secure storage area. On the monitors, it would look like nothing was happening, just an empty hallway and locked cases. In reality, they'd have a 10-minute window before the system reset itself. She checked her phone. 4:57 a.m. Driven would be waiting. The delivery entrance was in the basement, a heavy steel door that was usually locked and alarmed. Zara had disabled the alarm as part of her security override, and now she pushed the door open, her pulse racing. Driven was there, materializing out of the pre-dawn darkness like a ghost. He was wearing black from head to toe, and his white hair was tied back, making his sharp features even more pronounced. "Ready?" he asked softly. Zara nodded, not trusting her voice. She led him through the basement corridors, both of them moving quickly and quietly. The museum was eerily silent at this hour, just the hum of climate control systems and the occasional creak of old wood settling. The secure storage was behind 2 locked doors, both of which Zara had access to. Her hands fumbled with her keycard, but finally the locks clicked open. Inside, the cases gleamed under emergency lighting, and there in the center case was the seal of Corvinus. Draven stopped dead when he saw it. For a long moment he just stared, and Zara saw his throat work as he swallowed. Then he moved forward, reaching out with one pale hand. "The case is alarmed," Zara warned. "I can't disable it without leaving a trace." "Then don't." Before she could ask what he meant, Draven brought his fist down on the glass. It shattered with a sound like thunder, and immediately sirens began to wail. "What are you doing?" Zara shouted over the noise. "They'll know, everyone will." "I know." Draven grabbed the pendant, fastening it around his neck with quick movements. The red stone blazed against his pale skin, seeming to pulse with light. "But I won't let you take the fall for this. What are you talking about?" He turned to her and his expression was determined. "Go, run. When the guards come, tell them you heard the alarm and came to investigate. Tell them you saw an intruder, white hair, pale skin, dressed in black. Tell them he was too fast, that he escaped before you could stop him. They'll think I helped you. They won't. Not if you're here. Not if you're the one who reported it." He gripped her shoulders, his touch cold even through her jacket. "Trust me, Zara. This way you're a witness, not a suspect." Footsteps were thundering down the hallway, the guards responding to the alarm. Draven released her and stepped back toward the door they'd entered through. "Wait," Zara said desperately. "When will I see you again?" He paused, something intense flashing in his red eyes. "Soon, I promise. Stay safe, little historian." Then he was gone, moving with that impossible speed, and Zara was alone in the storage room with the shattered case and the blaring alarm. She barely had time to school her expression into shock before the guards burst in, weapons drawn. "Ms. Morrison, are you all right?" I heard the alarm," she stammered, which was true. "I came to check and there was someone here." "A man," he broke the case. "Where did he go?" She pointed toward the delivery entrance, and the guards took off running. Another guard stayed with her, checking her over for injuries, asking her questions. Zara answered on autopilot, describing Draven, saying he'd moved too fast for her to stop him, that she'd been too shocked to do anything. The police came. Then Henderson, looking absolutely devastated when he saw the empty case. Zara gave her statement again and again, sticking to the story Draven had told her to tell. Through it all, she felt numb, disconnected from what was happening. It wasn't until hours later, when they finally let her go home, that the reality hit her. She'd just helped steal a priceless artifact. She'd lied to the police. She'd committed a crime, even if no one knew it yet. And she was in far too deep to back out now. The next few days were a nightmare. The museum was crawling with investigators, and Zara was interviewed 3 more times. They pulled security footage from every camera, tried to track the intruder's escape route, questioned all the staff. But Draven had been careful, too careful. He'd avoided the cameras she hadn't disabled, moved too fast for any footage to be clear, left no fingerprints or DNA behind. The official story became that a professional thief had somehow infiltrated the museum, disabled key security systems, and stolen the Corvinus pendant. Zara was treated as a witness, even as a minor hero, for trying to confront the thief. No one suspected her. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt anxious, jumping at shadows, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Draven had said he'd contact her soon, but soon was subjective when you were immortal. What if he'd gotten what he wanted and disappeared? What if she never saw him again? The thought bothered her more than it should have. She barely knew him. He was a vampire, for God's sake, a creature that shouldn't exist. But she couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at her. The gentleness in his voice when he'd called her brave, the grief in his eyes when he'd spoken of his fallen court. A week after the theft, Zara was walking home from the subway when she felt it again, that prickle of awareness that meant she was being watched. She stopped on the corner, looking around, and saw him. Draven was standing across the street, partially hidden in the shadow of a building. Their eyes met and he tilted his head slightly, a clear invitation. Zara glanced around to make sure no one was paying attention, then crossed over to him. "You look tired," he said quietly. "I've been questioned by the police approximately 40,000 times," she replied, trying to keep the edge out of her voice. "Turns out being involved in a major theft is stressful. I'm sorry. I tried to make it as clean as possible. I know. It worked. They don't suspect me. But that doesn't mean it's been fun." She looked at him properly for the first time in a week, and her breath caught. He was wearing the pendant, the red stone resting against his chest, and there was something different about him. He seemed stronger somehow, more solid, as if the pendant had anchored him. I wanted to thank you properly, Driven said. Will you come with me? There's something I'd like to show you. Every instinct screamed that this was a bad idea. But Zara found herself nodding anyway, following him as he led her down a side street, then into an alley that opened into a hidden courtyard she'd never noticed before. There was a door there, black metal with no handle, and Driven placed his palm against it. Something clicked, and the door swung open, revealing a staircase leading down. Where does this go? Zara asked. My court, or what remains of it. The staircase descended for what felt like forever deep beneath the city streets. The walls were old brick, and the air grew cooler with each step. Finally, they emerged into a vast underground space, and Zara's jaw dropped. It was like stepping into a Gothic cathedral. Vaulted ceilings soared overhead, supported by stone pillars carved with intricate designs. Candles flickered in iron sconces, casting dancing shadows, and rich tapestries hung from the walls. There was furniture scattered throughout: velvet couches, mahogany tables, bookshelves that stretched from floor to ceiling, but it was also clearly abandoned. Dust covered everything, and there were signs of violent scorch marks on the walls, broken furniture, dark stains on the stone floor that Zara tried not to think about too hard. This was my court, Driven said, his voice echoing in the vast space, where I ruled for over 2 centuries after my father's death, where my people lived and worked and died. Zara turned slowly, taking it all in. It's incredible and horrible, yes. He moved through the space like a ghost, trailing his fingers over surfaces. 60 years ago, Alexander and his allies attacked. They came during the day when most of my court was weakest. They killed everyone they could find: nobles, servants, even children. Those who escaped scattered to the winds, too afraid to return. Why? Zara asked. Why did they attack? Power territory. Alexander wanted to rule the eastern seaboard, and my court stood in his way. Driven stopped in front of a throne, a massive chair of carved black wood and red velvet, dusty and faded now. My father built this court to be a place where vampires and humans could coexist peacefully. We employed humans as staff, protected them, treated them with respect. Alexander thinks humans are nothing but food and servants. He wanted to return to the old ways, the brutal ways. And now that you have the pendant, what happens? Driven turned to face her, the red stone gleaming at his throat. Now I call what remains of my people home. The pendant is a beacon. Any vampire of Corvinus blood will feel its pull and know that their king still lives. They'll come back, slowly but surely. And when enough have returned, I'll challenge Alexander. I'll take back what he stole. You mean you'll fight him? To the death if necessary. His expression was hard. He murdered my father, my friends, my entire court. I've waited 60 years for this chance, Zara. I won't waste it. She should have been horrified by the talk of violence and death. Instead, she felt a fierce satisfaction. Justice, her mind whispered. He deserves justice. How can I help? The words were out before she could stop them. Driven blinked, clearly surprised. You've already helped more than you know. The pendant isn't enough, is it? You said you need vampires to return, to rebuild your court. That's going to take time, and Alexander isn't going to sit around waiting for you to gather an army. Zara moved closer to him, her mind racing. You need information. You need to know what he's planning, where his vulnerabilities are. And I can help with that. How? I'm a historian. Research is literally my job. She pulled out her phone, already pulling up her notes. I've been reading everything I can find about vampire courts, about the power structures and traditions. If you're going to challenge Alexander, you need to do it right, according to the old laws, so other vampires will recognize your authority. Driven stared at her for a long moment, then something shifted in his expression, surprise giving way to admiration. You've been researching vampire politics? I've been researching you, your family, your history, everything I could find. Zara felt her cheeks heat. I wanted to understand, and I thought maybe there was something in the old records that could help. And is there? Maybe. According to the accounts I found, a challenge to vampire authority has to be witnessed by at least 3 neutral courts. Otherwise, even if you win, other vampires could claim it was just a personal vendetta, not a legitimate transfer of power. Driven's eyes widened slightly. That's right, I'd forgotten. It's been so long since we followed the old traditions. So you need allies, neutral vampires who will witness your challenge and verify that it's legitimate. Zara warmed to her subject, her historian instincts taking over. Are there other courts in the city? Other vampire leaders who aren't loyal to Alexander? A few. Small operations, mostly vampires who keep to themselves and try to avoid the power struggles. Driven started pacing, his long coat swirling. The Noctis family in Brooklyn, the Sanguis Coven in Queens, and there's a lone elder in Staten Island, Mordecai, who's older than even Alexander. Would they help you? I don't know. They've stayed neutral for 60 years, refusing to choose sides. But if I could convince them. He stopped pacing, turning to her with sudden intensity. You're brilliant. Do you know that? Zara felt her face flush again. I'm just doing what I'm good at. Research and problem solving. You're doing more than that. Driven crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides, and suddenly he was right there, close enough that she could see the flecks of deeper crimson in his red eyes. You're risking yourself for me. For a cause that isn't yours. Why? Because it's right, she said quietly. Because what Alexander did was wrong, and what you're trying to do, rebuilding, protecting people, maintaining balance, that matters. She hesitated, then added, and because when I'm with you, I don't feel alone. The words hung between them, raw and honest. Driven reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face with one cool hand. You're not alone, he said, his voice rough. Not anymore, I swear it. Then he kissed her. It was nothing like Zara had imagined kissing a vampire would be. His lips were cool but soft, and he kissed her with a gentleness that made her chest ache. She felt his other hand come up to cradle her face, holding her like she was something precious, and she melted into him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, or at least Zara was breathing hard, she wasn't sure if Driven needed to breathe. She found herself laughing a little. I can't believe I just kissed a vampire king. I can't believe a human historian just solved a problem I've been struggling with for 60 years. Driven rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. You're extraordinary, Zara Morrison. So are you, Driven Corvinus. They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other in the ruins of his fallen court. Then Driven pulled back, his expression turning serious. If you're going to help me, you need to understand the risks. Alexander has spies everywhere. If he learns that you're important to me, that you help me retrieve the pendant, he'll target you. I can handle myself. Against a vampire who's over 3,000 years old. Driven shook his head. No human could. That's why I need you to stay alert, stay careful. Don't go anywhere alone after dark. Keep your phone with you always, and if you see anything suspicious, any sign that someone is following you, contact me immediately. He handed her a phone, not a smartphone, just a simple flip phone with a single number programmed in. This connects directly to me, no one else. I'll answer anytime, day or night. Zara took the phone, tucking it into her pocket. What happens now? Now I start reaching out to the other courts, seeing who might be willing to witness a challenge. And you go back to your life, your job. Act normal. If anyone asks, you don't know anything about the theft except what you told the police. And when will I see you again? Draven's expression softened. Soon, I promise. But Zara, once this starts, once I formally challenge Alexander, there's no going back. Things are going to get dangerous. I know. She squared her shoulders, trying to look braver than she felt. I'm ready. He kissed her again, quick and fierce, then stepped back. Go, I'll be watching over you even if you don't see me. Zara made her way back up the stairs and out into the New York night. The city seemed different now, full of shadows and secrets she'd never noticed before. Somewhere out there, ancient vampires were plotting and scheming, and she was right in the middle of it. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. Over the next 2 weeks, life developed a strange new rhythm. During the day, Zara went to work at the museum, cataloging artifacts and fielding questions about the theft. The investigators had mostly moved on, accepting that the thief was long gone. But Henderson was still devastated about losing the pendant. At night, though, Zara became someone else. She met with Driven in his underground court, helping him plan his next moves. She researched vampire law and history, compiling everything she learned into detailed notes. And slowly, carefully, they reached out to the other vampire courts in the city. The Noctis family was willing to meet. They were a small group, only 5 vampires, led by a woman named Cassandra who had striking silver eyes and an air of cautious authority. Zara sat in on the meeting there as Driven's advisor and watched as he negotiated. You're asking us to risk everything, Cassandra said, her voice cool. Alexander has ruled the city for 60 years. He has resources, allies, power. What do you have? The seal of Corvinus. Driven touched the pendant at his throat, the legitimate claim to rule. And the memory of what this city was like when my father kept the peace. Memories don't win wars. No, but justice does. Driven leaned forward, his red eyes intense. Alexander rules through fear and brutality. He takes what he wants, kills who he wants, and leaves chaos in his wake. How long before he decides your territory is worth taking? How long before he turns on you? Cassandra was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at Zara. And you, human, what's your place in this? I'm helping him, Zara said simply. Because what he's doing is right. A human who allies with vampires. Interesting. Cassandra's silver eyes glittered. Very well, Driven Corvinus. My family will witness your challenge, provided you follow the old laws to the letter. But we will not fight alongside you. This is your battle, understood, and thank you. One court down, 2 to go. The Sanguis Coven was harder to convince. They were younger vampires only a few centuries old, and they were more interested in staying under Alexander's radar than in ancient politics. But Driven was patient, persuasive, and eventually their leader, a man named Raphael with dark eyes and a serious demeanor, agreed to witness as well. That left Mordecai, the elder in Staten Island, and he was the most important one. At over 5,000 years old, he was ancient even by vampire standards, and his word carried weight. If he agreed to witness the challenge, other vampires would take notice. Getting a meeting with Mordecai took another week of careful negotiation. He was a recluse, living in a massive estate that overlooked the water, and he rarely saw anyone. But finally he agreed to meet with Driven on the condition that Zara came too. "Why does he want to meet me?" she asked as they drove across the Varazzi Bridge in Driven's sleek black car. Mordecai is old enough to remember when humans and vampires worked together regularly. He's probably curious about you, about why a human would involve herself in our politics. Driven glanced at her, his expression concerned. "Are you sure you're comfortable with this?" Mordecai is powerful, and old vampires can be unpredictable. "I'll be fine. Besides, you'll be there, always." Mordecai's estate was exactly what Zara had expected, all stone walls and Gothic architecture, with gardens that had grown wild over the years. A servant met them at the door, a vampire with silver hair and ancient eyes, and led them through corridors lined with artwork that probably belonged in museums. Mordecai himself was waiting in a library that could have housed a small college. Books filled every wall, stacked on tables, piled on chairs. And in the center of it all sat an old man, or at least he looked old. His hair was long and white, his face lined with age, and his eyes were the palest blue Zara had ever seen, almost colorless. Driven Corvinus. Mordecai's voice was surprisingly strong. "I knew your father. He was a good king. Thank you, elder." Driven bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. "I'm trying to follow in his footsteps. Are you, or are you simply seeking revenge?" Those pale eyes shifted to Zara. "And who is this, your human pet?" "I'm his advisor," Zara said before Driven could answer. "And friend. My name is Zara Morrison." Mordecai's eyebrows rose. "A human with a spine. How refreshing." He gestured to chairs. "Sit, both of you, let's talk." They sat, and Mordecai studied them both for a long moment. Then he said, "I know why you're here. You want to challenge Alexander for control of the Eastern Territories. You want me to witness and legitimize your claim." "Yes," Driven said simply. "Why should I? Alexander is brutal. Yes, but he's stable. He keeps order in his own way. You're an unknown quantity, Driven. You've been in hiding for 60 years. How do I know you're strong enough to rule? Because I have what Alexander lacks, the legitimate right, granted by blood and tradition. Because I remember the old ways, the balance my father maintained, and because I'm willing to die trying to restore that balance." Pretty words. But I've lived over 5 millennia, boy. I've heard pretty words from countless would-be kings. Mordecai turned to Zara. "What do you think, human? Is he worth supporting?" Zara took a deep breath. "I think he's trying to build something better than what exists now. I think he actually cares about the people, human and vampire, who live in this city. And I think he's willing to sacrifice everything to protect them. That's worth supporting." Mordecai was quiet for so long that Zara wondered if she'd offended him. Then slowly he smiled. "You're in love with him." Zara felt her face flush, but she didn't deny it. "Yes, but that doesn't make what I said less true." "No, I suppose it doesn't." Mordecai looked at Driven. "Your father fell in love with a human once, did you know that? Long before he met your mother. She died of old age while he remained young, and it nearly destroyed him. Love between our kinds is always tragic." "Not always," Driven said quietly, reaching over to take Zara's hand. "Sometimes it's the thing that makes us remember why immortality is worth living." Mordecai studied their joined hands, then sighed. "Very well, I'll witness your challenge, Driven Corvinus. But know this: if you fail, if Alexander kills you, there will be no one left to stand against him. No more Corvinus line, no more hope for change. I know, and I won't fail." "We'll see." They had their 3 witnesses. Now all that remained was to issue the formal challenge. Driven wanted to do it the traditional way, a written declaration delivered to Alexander's court by a neutral messenger. Zara helped him draft it, using the formal language she'd found in historical accounts, making sure every word was perfect. "It has to be me who delivers it," she said when they were done. "Absolutely not." Driven's voice was firm. "I won't put you in that kind of danger. It has to be someone neutral, someone who's not part of your court. That's the tradition, right?" Zara crossed her arms. "I'm the only option. And besides, I want to see what we're up against." They argued about it for hours, but eventually Driven gave in, mostly because he knew she was right. The challenge had to be delivered by someone with no stake in the fight, and there was no one else he trusted for the job. So 3 nights later, Zara found herself standing outside a nightclub in the meatpacking district, clutching a sealed envelope and trying not to shake. The club was called Sangre, and according to Driven, it was the front for Alexander's court. Driven himself was waiting half a block away, close enough to intervene if something went wrong, but far enough that he wouldn't be seen. They'd agreed that he would stay hidden unless Zara was in immediate danger. Zara pushed through the club's entrance, past the velvet ropes and into a world of pounding music and writhing bodies. The air was thick with sweat and perfume and something else, something metallic that made her skin crawl. Blood, she realized. She was smelling blood. A hand caught her arm before she'd made it 10 feet inside. Zara turned to find a tall man with slicked-back dark hair and golden eyes looking down at her. "You're human," he said, his voice carrying over the music somehow. "Humans don't usually come here uninvited. I have a message for Alexander Dracul." Zara held up the envelope, proud that her hand was steady. "It's urgent." The man's eyes narrowed. "Who sent you?" "That's between me and Alexander. Will you take me to him or not?" For a moment she thought he might refuse or worse, attack her. Then he released her arm and jerked his head toward a door at the back of the club. "Follow me and don't touch anything." He led her through the door and down a corridor that grew progressively quieter as they left the music behind. At the end was another door, this one carved from dark wood and flanked by 2 more vampires, both heavily muscled and watchful. "Human with a message for the master," her guide said. The guards exchanged glances, then one opened the door. Beyond was a room that could only be described as a throne room, all dark marble and blood-red velvet, with candles providing the only light. And seated on a throne at the far end, watching her with ancient golden eyes, was Alexander Dracul. He was beautiful in the way a predator was beautiful, all sharp angles and perfect features, with white blonde hair that fell to his shoulders and skin so pale it seemed to glow. He wore a modern suit, perfectly tailored, but there was nothing modern about the way he held himself. This was a being who'd ruled for millennia, who'd seen empires rise and fall. "A human messenger," Alexander said, his voice like silk over steel. "How interesting. Come closer, little girl. Let me see you properly." Zara forced herself to walk forward, every instinct screaming at her to run. She stopped a respectful distance from the throne and held out the envelope. "I bring a formal challenge from Driven Corvinus, rightful heir to the Eastern Territories. It's all in there, the terms, the witnesses, everything." Alexander took the envelope, his long fingers brushing hers, and she shuddered at the contact. He was cold, so cold, and there was something wrong about his touch, something that made her think of graves and death. He opened the envelope and read the contents, his expression never changing. Then he looked up at her and smiled, showing teeth that were just a bit too sharp. So the little prince finally crawled out of hiding. How delightful. He stood, moving with liquid grace, and descended the steps toward her. And he sent a human to deliver his challenge. "Tell me, what's your name?" "Zara Morrison, Zara Morrison," he repeated, as if tasting the words. "And what is Driven Corvinus to you? Why would a human risk herself entering my court? I'm his advisor." "Liar." Alexander circled her slowly, and Zara had to fight not to turn and keep him in view. "Advisors don't smell like fear and love mixed together. You're his lover, aren't you? His little human pet." "I'm not anyone's pet, so fierce." He stopped in front of her, reaching out to tip her chin up with one cold finger. "I can see why he likes you. There's fire in you, despite your fear. But you must know how this ends, don't you? I'm going to kill Driven, just like I killed his father. And then I'm going to find every vampire who supports him and kill them too. It's nothing personal, it's just how power works." "Then you accept the challenge?" "Of course. How can I resist? It's been so long since I had a proper fight." He released her chin, stepping back. 7 nights from now, at the old cathedral ruins in Brooklyn. Tell your prince I'll be waiting. And Zara Morrison, you should say your goodbyes to him now. You won't get another chance." Zara turned and walked out, forcing herself not to run, not to show how terrified she was. It wasn't until she was back on the street, breathing the cool night air, that she allowed herself to shake. Driven appeared at her side instantly, his hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" "I'm fine." He accepted. She looked up at him, seeing the concern in his red eyes. 7 nights at the cathedral ruins. Good. That gives me time to prepare." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Zara buried her face in his chest. He was cool and solid, and despite everything, she felt safe. "He said he's going to kill you," she whispered. "He's going to try." Driven's voice was grim. "But I have advantages he doesn't know about. The pendant, for one, it strengthens me, makes me faster and stronger. And I have you. Your research, your strategies. That counts for more than he realizes. They went back to his underground court, and for the next week they prepared. Driven trained constantly, pushing himself to his limits, testing the extent of his powers with the pendant. Zara researched everything she could find about Alexander, his fighting style, his known abilities, his weaknesses. And in the quiet moments between planning and training, they were together. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, Driven's memories of his long life, Zara's dreams for the future. They kissed in the candlelight, held each other in the darkness, and tried not to think about the fact that in 7 days, one of them might be saying goodbye forever. I want you to stay away from the fight, Driven said on the 6th night. They were in his private chambers, lying together on a bed that was easily 200 years old. The witnesses will be there and probably half the vampires in the city. It's going to be dangerous. I'm coming, Zara said firmly. You're not doing this alone, Zara. No. I've helped you get this far. I'm seeing it through to the end. She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. Besides, you might need me. I know more about vampire law than anyone except Mordecai at this point. If Alexander tries to pull something underhanded, someone needs to be there to call him on it. Draven reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. You're going to be the death of me, you know that? Not if I can help it. She leaned down and kissed him, slow and deep, trying to pour everything she felt into it, all her fear and hope and love. When they broke apart, Driven said quietly, if something happens to me, if this goes wrong, I need you to promise me something. Don't promise me you'll run. Don't try to fight. Don't try to avenge me. Just run and hide and forget you ever knew me. His hand cupped her face. Promise me, Zara. I promise, she lied, knowing she'd never be able to keep it. The 7th night came too quickly. Zara dressed carefully, wearing dark clothes that would let her blend into the shadows, and tucked the phone Driven had given her into her pocket. She felt like she was preparing for war, and in a way she was. Driven looked like a king. He wore black leather and velvet, with the seal of Corvinus gleaming at his throat, and his white hair was loose around his shoulders. His red eyes burned with determination, and when he looked at her, Zara saw both love and fear there. Ready? He asked. Ready. They drove to Brooklyn in silence. Driven's hand clasped tight around hers. The cathedral ruins were in a forgotten part of the borough, a once grand church that had burned down decades ago and never been rebuilt. Now it was just walls and columns reaching toward the sky, beautiful and eerie in the moonlight. Vampires were already gathering when they arrived. Zara recognized Cassandra from the Noctis family, Raphael from the Sanguis Coven, and Mordecai, who stood apart from everyone else, his pale eyes watching everything. But there were others too, dozens of vampires she'd never seen, all drawn by the promise of violence and the chance to see history unfold. And there, in the center of the ruins, stood Alexander Drakel. He looked exactly as he had in his court, coldly beautiful and utterly dangerous. When he saw Driven, he smiled, and it was like watching a shark bare its teeth. The prodigal prince returns. How dramatic. Driven stepped forward, his movements controlled and graceful. Alexander Drakel, I challenge you for control of the Eastern Territories by right of blood and tradition. Do you accept? You know I do. Alexander shrugged off his coat, revealing a black shirt beneath. This is going to be fun. Mordecai stepped into the center of the ruins, his ancient voice carrying in the night air. By the old laws, this challenge is witnessed and recognized. The fight will continue until one party yields or dies. There will be no interference, no outside help. Do you both understand? Yes, Driven said. Perfectly. Alexander agreed. Mordecai stepped back, and the two vampires began to circle each other. They moved so fast Zara could barely track them. One moment they were circling, the next they were locked together, trading blows that would have killed any human instantly. Alexander was fast, faster than anyone Zara had ever seen, but Driven was faster. The pendant blazed with light as he fought, lending him strength and speed. They broke apart, and Alexander was actually bleeding from a cut on his cheek. He touched the blood, looking surprised, then laughed. You've gotten stronger, little prince. The seal suits you, but it won't be enough. He lunged again, and this time Zara saw the moment when it all went wrong. Alexander feinted left, then struck right, his hand closing around Driven's throat. He lifted Driven off the ground, squeezing, and Zara heard herself scream. Did you really think you could beat me? Alexander's voice was mocking. I've been killing kings for 3,000 years. But Driven wasn't done. His hand shot out, grabbing Alexander's wrist, and the pendant flared so bright it was like a small sun. Alexander howled, his skin blistering where Driven touched him, and he dropped Driven, stumbling back. The fight became brutal after that. They tore into each other with inhuman strength, drawing blood, breaking bones. The other vampires watched in awed silence, and Zara stood frozen, her heart in her throat, praying to any god that would listen. Then Alexander made a mistake. He overextended on a strike, and Driven was there, his hand driving forward. Zara saw it happen as if in slow motion, Driven's hand punching through Alexander's chest, grabbing something vital inside. Alexander's eyes went wide. He looked down at the hand protruding from his chest, then up at Driven's face. "Impossible," he whispered. "For my father," Driven said quietly. "For my court, for everyone you killed." He ripped his hand back and Alexander collapsed. For a moment the ancient vampire twitched, trying to rise, then he went still. Truly still in the way only the dead can be. Silence fell over the ruins, then Mordecai stepped forward, his voice ringing out. "Alexander Dracal is dead. By the old laws, Draven Corvinus is recognized as the rightful king of the Eastern Territories. All here bear witness." One by one, the vampires in attendance knelt. First Cassandra and her family, then Raphael and his coven, then others vampires Zara didn't know, all bowing to their new king. Driven stood in the center of it all, covered in blood his own, and Alexander's looking stunned. Then his eyes found Zara and he moved, crossing the distance between them in seconds. "You're alive," she breathed, reaching up to touch his face. "You're alive, thanks to you." He pulled her close, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "Your research, your strategies, your belief in me, that's what won this fight." Around them the vampires were starting to disperse, murmuring among themselves. The challenge was over, the new order established. But Zara only had eyes for Driven, for the vampire king who'd caught a blade barehanded to save her life and had somehow become everything to her. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild, slowly, carefully, but together." He pulled back enough to look at her properly. "If you'll stay with me, I know it's not a normal life, being involved with a vampire, especially one who's now ruling half the eastern seaboard. But I want you with me, Zara, as my advisor, my partner, my love, if you'll have me." Zara laughed, the sound a little hysterical but genuine. "You're asking if I'll have you? You're an immortal vampire king. I'm a museum archivist who lives in a studio apartment. Are you sure you want to saddle yourself with a human?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Driven's expression was completely serious. "I love you, Zara Morrison. You've given me hope when I had none, helped me reclaim everything I'd lost. You've made me remember what it means to care about someone more than power or revenge. So yes, I'm sure then yes," she said, feeling tears prick her eyes. "Yes, I'll stay with you. I love you too, you ridiculous vampire." He kissed her then, deep and fierce, in front of all the assembled vampires and gods and anyone else who might be watching. And Zara kissed him back, pouring all her love and relief and joy into it. When they finally broke apart, Mordecai was standing nearby, a slight smile on his ancient face. "Your father would be proud," he said to Driven. "You've reclaimed not just your throne but the values he held dear. Don't lose sight of them." "I won't. I have someone to remind me now." Driven's arm tightened around Zara's waist. The ancient vampire looked at Zara, his pale eyes twinkling. "Take care of him, human. Kings need someone to keep them grounded, to remind them they're more than their crown." "I will," Zara promised. Over the following weeks, the underground court came back to life. Vampires began returning, those who'd scattered after the original attack, drawn by the pull of the seal, and the news that a Corvinus sat on the throne again. They cleaned the great hall, repaired the damage, hung new tapestries. It was like watching a garden bloom after a long winter. Zara quit her job at the museum, or rather, she told Henderson she was taking a position as a private consultant for a wealthy collector. It wasn't entirely a lie. She spent her days documenting vampire history, helping Driven establish new laws and protocols for his court. She became the bridge between the human and vampire worlds, using her knowledge and perspective to help shape policies that protected both. They turned one of the underground chambers into a library, filling it with books on history and law and culture. Zara spent hours there, sometimes joined by younger vampires who were curious about the human world, sometimes alone with her research. It was everything she'd ever wanted: a chance to study and preserve history, but history that was alive and immediate and desperately important. And at night, she was with Driven. They'd moved her belongings into his private chambers, a ridiculous opulent suite that made her studio apartment look like a closet. They talked about their days, made plans for the court's future, and loved each other with an intensity that never seemed to fade. "Do you ever regret it?" Driven asked one night, as they lay tangled together in his massive bed. "Giving up your normal life for this?" Zara propped herself up to look at him, taking in his pale beauty, the way the candlelight caught in his white hair. "Never. This is where I'm meant to be. With you, you'll age," he said quietly. "Grow old while I stay young. One day, decades from now, you'll die, and I'll still be here. I know." She'd thought about it, of course. The impossible mathematics of loving an immortal. But that's decades away. For now we have time, and I'd rather have whatever time we get together than an eternity without you. Draven pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes. Good, terror keeps you sharp. She kissed his jaw, his cheek, his lips. Now stop being morbid. We have a meeting with the Brooklyn court tomorrow, remember? Raphael wants to discuss territory agreements. Always bringing me back to business. What would I do without you? Probably brood dramatically in the throne room. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. And Zara thought about how far they'd both come. From that night in the alley when he'd caught a blade bare-handed to save her life, to this moment building a future together despite all the odds, the court continued to grow. Within 6 months, Draven had over 50 vampires under his rule, all loyal and committed to his vision of balance and coexistence. He established formal agreements with the human authorities, nothing public, but quiet arrangements that let both sides work together when supernatural problems arose. Zara became something of a legend among the vampire community. The human who'd helped the vampire king reclaim his throne, who'd walked into Alexander's court and delivered a challenge without flinching. Young vampires looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and respect, and older ones treated her as an equal, recognizing the influence she held. She was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way she'd never been before. Her life had purpose, direction, love. She was making a difference, helping to shape a world where humans and vampires could coexist peacefully. But she was also aware of time passing in a way she never had been before. Every gray hair she found, every line that appeared around her eyes was a reminder that her time was finite, while Draven's was not. I've been thinking, she said one evening, about a year after the challenge. They were in the library, Draven reading over some territorial agreement while she catalogued new acquisitions. There are stories about humans who've been turned, who've become vampires. Draven's head snapped up, his red eyes sharp. No, you didn't let me finish. I know what you're going to ask, and the answer is no. I won't turn you, Zara. She set down her pen, giving him her full attention. Why not? We could have forever together instead of just a few decades. Because the transformation is agony. Because there's no guarantee you'd survive it, many humans don't. Because you'd lose the very thing that makes you special, your humanity, your perspective, your ability to understand both worlds. He stood, crossing to her, taking her hands in his. I fell in love with you as you are. I don't want to change that, but I'm going to die, eventually. Not for decades if I have anything to say about it. But yes, someday. His grip tightened. And it will destroy me, Zara. Losing you will be the hardest thing I've ever endured. But I'd rather have you for the time we have, fully and completely yourself, than have a vampire who looks like you but has lost that spark that makes you who you are. Zara felt tears prick her eyes. That's very poetic and sad. I know, I've had a long time to think about it. He pulled her up, wrapping his arms around her. Please don't ask me again. I won't do that to you. She nodded against his chest, accepting his decision even though part of her wanted to argue. He was right, she knew. The stories about transformations were full of pain and loss, and people who came through changed in ways that went beyond the physical. She didn't want to lose herself, even for immortality. So she focused on the time they had. She threw herself into her work at the court, helping Draven establish a library and archive that would preserve vampire history for future generations. She learned the intricacies of vampire politics, becoming skilled at negotiation and diplomacy. She became, in every way that mattered, a queen in all but name. Years passed. 5, then 10, then 20. Zara's dark hair developed streaks of silver, and fine lines appeared at the corners of her eyes. But she was healthy and active, still brilliant and fierce. Still the person Draven had fallen in love with. The court flourished under their combined leadership. Other vampire kings and queens from around the world began reaching out, interested in the model Draven had established. Slowly, carefully, they built alliances and agreements, creating a network of courts that worked together rather than constantly fighting for dominance. It wasn't perfect. There were still incidents, still vampires who rejected the new way and had to be dealt with. But it was better, so much better than the chaos and violence that had reigned before. On their 20th anniversary, 20 years since that night, when Draven had caught the blade meant for her, he took Zara back to the street where they'd first met. I've walked past this alley 10,000 times in my life, Draven said, looking at the brick walls and shadows. But it never meant anything until the night I found you here. You saved my life, Zara said, slipping her hand into his. And you saved mine. Not from death, but from loneliness, from losing myself in grief and rage. He turned to her, and in the streetlight, his red eyes gleamed. 20 years, and I love you more now than I did then. How is that possible? Because love grows. It changes and deepens and becomes more complex. Zara reached up to touch his face, this vampire king who'd become everything to her. I wouldn't trade a single moment of the time we've had together, neither would I. He kissed her gently. Thank you, Zara Morrison, for choosing me, for believing in me, for building this life with me. Thank you for catching that blade, she whispered against his lips, for not flinching, for being strong enough to protect me even when it cost you blood. They stood there in the alley where it had all begun. Two people from different worlds who'd found something rare and precious in each other. The future stretched out before them, finite for her, eternal for him, but filled with love and purpose and meaning for however long they had. And in that moment, under the New York City streetlights, with the sound of traffic and humanity all around them, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 25 years after that night in the alley, Zara woke up one morning in Dreven's arms and knew something was wrong. Her chest felt tight, her breathing labored. She tried to sit up and couldn't quite manage it. Dreven, she managed, and he was awake instantly, his red eyes sharp with concern. What's wrong? I don't know, I can't breathe properly. He carried her to the court's medical wing where a vampire physician who'd been a doctor for 3 centuries before being turned examined her carefully. The diagnosis was grave. Heart failure, probably genetic, accelerated by age. How long? Dreven asked, his voice deadly calm. Weeks, maybe. I'm sorry, my lord, there's nothing I can do. Zara spent those weeks surrounded by love. The vampires of the court visited constantly, bringing flowers and books and stories, thanking her for everything she'd done. Cassandra came from Brooklyn, Raphael from Queens, even Mordecai made the journey to pay his respects. You've changed the world, the ancient vampire told her, his pale eyes soft. Not many can say that, human or vampire. You should be proud. I am, Zara said. She was in bed now, too weak to get up, but surrounded by comfort. Dreven rarely left her side, holding her hand, reading to her, just being there. On what turned out to be her last night, she woke to find him watching her, tears tracking down his pale cheeks. Don't cry, she whispered. We knew this was coming. That doesn't make it easier. His voice broke. I'm not ready to lose you. You'll never lose me. I'll be in every book in the library, every law you pass, every moment of peace the court knows. I'll be in your heart, always. She squeezed his hand weakly. You're going to be a great king, Dreven Corvinus, the greatest your line has ever known. And part of that will always be because of what we built together. I love you, he said, bending to kiss her forehead. I will love you until the stars burn out and beyond. I love you too, so much. She smiled at him, at this beautiful, ancient, wonderful being who'd chosen to love her. Thank you for catching that blade, for saving me so we could have all this time together. Thank you for letting me, he whispered. Zara drifted off to sleep in his arms, and sometime before dawn her heart simply stopped. Dreven held her as she passed, his tears falling like rain, and when the sun rose he was still there, cradling her body, unwilling to let go. They held a funeral that was attended by hundreds of vampires and humans alike, all whose lives she'd touched. They buried her in a garden Dreven had built beneath the court, where moonflowers bloomed eternal and the air was always sweet. And true to his word, Dreven carried on. He ruled wisely and well, always guided by the principles Zara had helped him establish. The court flourished, becoming a model for vampire society worldwide. Peace reigned, and humans and vampires learned to coexist in ways that had seemed impossible before. Every night, Dreven visited Zara's grave, telling her about his day, about the court, about the world that kept turning. And sometimes, in the quiet darkness, he could almost feel her there beside him, her fierce intelligence, her unwavering love, her absolute certainty that they were building something worth fighting for. She'd given him 25 years. It wasn't enough, it would never be enough, but it had been glorious and beautiful and more than he'd ever hoped to have. She'd saved him from the darkness, shown him how to be a king worthy of his crown, and loved him with a completeness that had made even immortality seem precious. The vampire king had caught a blade bare-handed to save her life, and in return, she'd given him a reason to live. It was a fair trade, the best trade he'd ever made. And as the centuries rolled on and the world changed around him, Dreven Corvinus never forgot the human woman who'd walked fearlessly into his world and transformed everything. Her legacy lived on in every law he passed, every life he protected, every moment of peace his court knew. Zara Morrison had been mortal, finite, gloriously human. But the love they'd shared, the future they'd built together, that was immortal, just like him.